Good morning. Happy Sunday. Sunday. Sunday's always a great day. Sunday for me, as it relates to Facebook Live, is Book Club Sunday. It's where I get to share the book that I read this week. And this week, I read The Standard by Ben Newman. The Standard by Ben Newman. I first heard Ben on a podcast with Dave Savage. And the podcast was Attack the Process. And then I was curious about Ben. And so I listened to a podcast with him and Ed Milet. And Ed is a huge supporter of Ben Newman, and then, oddly enough, I was at a mastermind retreat with about 20 folks, and Ben led the retreat for one of the days. So we had Ben Newman for almost a whole day, and if you don't know who Ben is a mental toughness and performance coach. And it's interesting, spending a day with a mental toughness coach is tough, right? Because they're challenging and they're intense, and he has kind of a friendly intensity to him, but quite a bit of intensity. I'll tell you before I get onto the book. Ben led a exercise workout in the morning at 6 o'clock before our event, which is scheduled to start at 8. I wasn't staying at the hotel because it just happened to be in Scottsdale. That mastermind meets in a different city every quarter. And so I live about 20 miles away, and there's no way for me to get to the workout, come back to my house, shower, and then get back to the mastermind starting at 8 o'clock. So I wasn't able to do the workout with them. I just did my own thing. But from all reports, it was absolutely grueling, and people were falling over after just a short amount of time. And just when you think you're done with his workout, that's when he gets to the unrequired part of the workout, which is just intense. And I can tell you, almost everybody participated. Everybody that stayed in the hotel participated, and they were very tuckered out and sore by the end of the day. That's neither here nor there, but that's how I've been introduced to Ben. I have a few friends and acquaintances that are coached by Ben. Even the little exposure I've had to his material has been fantastic. So, The Standard, this is a little short, kind of compact book. It's really only around 120 pages. If you're like me, though, you take, I think I highlighted just about, every other sentence in the book. So it's short and compact. It probably struck me a little bit more since I've been exposed to Ben and to his concepts. The thing here, the book, the name is The Standard, Winning Every Day at Your Highest Level. And the core principle of the book is standards over feelings. And the premise is, look, our emotions, our feelings can only take us so far. They actually become limiting, right? And so instead, create a standard for your life, which is really a set of processes, habits, commitments, and disciplines. Like, create the framework and let the framework carry you forward, not your emotions or your feelings. Essentially is what it's about. And if you were to implement this framework called The Standard, you would, create outsized results. That's how you create the best you. And the real thing is that The Standard teaches you, when you focus on the process, that you can, that you control the process, what you do every day, how you show up every day, instead of the results, because you can't control results. You can only control the process. And that's really what The Standard is. And then a lot of The Standard is, when you're trying to create that framework, it takes a lot of mental toughness, because it's hard to become that person you want to become. And so you also have to create a level of mental toughness. But however, once you mastermind The Standard becomes the only way you know how to live. And that's a reoccurring theme in a lot of these books. It was the theme in last week's book, 10x is easier than 2x, which is, however you are one way, you're that way everywhere. Like you can't be Mr. Disciplined in work and Mr. Undisciplined at home. Or you can't be, wanting to live your best life as health, but then living a poor life with wealth. You're one way, and whatever that one way is where you are everywhere. But when you sharpen that one way you show up, it starts to expand in every way you show up, and that's why the standard becomes the only way you know how to live. And in essence, Ben believes the standard is simple. You just create this framework, and then you follow the framework. Now, the framework is very hard to build, and you can only build it a piece at a time. You can't just go, tomorrow I'm going to be a totally different person. You got to build a piece at a time. Now, as we get into the books, the beginning of the book, Ben goes through what he calls the elements of the standard. And these are 18 different facets that make up the standard. It's not the recipe, it's just the elements that you have to understand going in. And I'll just read them quickly. The first one is the standard is meaningful, meaning if it's not meaningful, then it's not worth it. It wouldn't be a standard if it wasn't meaningful. The standard is detailed, meaning it's not general. It's as specific as it can possibly be, right? And that's how you be able to hit the standard. The standard third is standard deletes negatives from your life. That's it's addition by subtraction. You live a better life by getting rid of things that are below your standard. 4 is the standard forces you to reflect on your core values. Right? You can't create a framework for what your best life is if you don't know what your best life is, and so you really have to get connected to your core values. The standard promotes ethical values, and each one of these things that I'm reading to you has a couple paragraphs or a page explanation to it. I strongly recommend getting the book. You can get it. We don't have time in this the little time we have here to go through all 18, in great detail. Number 5 is the standard promotes ethical values. Number 6 is the standard fulfills an emotional need without being emotional itself. And this is really complicated because the whole standard is about taking emotions out of your framework. But your emotions are what help you design your framework, and that can be kind of confusing, right? And it's not when you read it. It's really simple. You use emotion to ignite, essentially what your framework is. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. The standard, number 7 is the standard, and these aren't numbered, by the way, in the book. They're just sections. The standard is your habits taken to the next level. Number 8 is the standard creates unreasonable and uncomfortable scenarios, which I love. You're going to have to be uncomfortable to grow. Number 9 is the standard involves elements of risk. By the way, the risk is failure, and failure is not bad. Failing to try is bad, and you have to take risk. And part of that, when you get to the fringe of the standard, you're pushing yourself so hard you don't always succeed right there. You're going to fail, and that's the risk. But you just have to keep going. So there you go. Number 10 is the standard breeds confidence. Number 11 is the standard grows self-esteem. He'll explain the book. Confidence and self-esteem are different. Just so you know, confidence is how the world perceives you. Self-esteem is how you perceive yourself, essentially. Number 12 is the standard moves you closer to what you want to be. And that's the key point here. The standard is very personal. Right? It's your standard. It's not the world standard. It's not your neighbor's standard. It's not your wife's standard or your child's standard. It's your standard. It's very personal. The standard is a public declaration, meaning that not only do you want to share your standard with those that are most important to you, but people should witness your standard. Right? Number 14 is the standard is unique to you, but also sets an example for others. This is a really important part for leadership. So your standard starts becoming example to others, and Ben wrote a book that really touches on this, on leadership, which I might touch on if we have enough time at the end. The standard is not being perfect, because you can't attain perfection. You can only try to be the best you can be. The standard is not negotiable. That goes into your disciplines. The standard is all about consistency. And then the standard has no goals. It just has processes. It has a framework. Right? It doesn't have an outcome goal. So that's the elements of the standard. He goes on to continue to explain the standard, and he does by going, there's 4 P's to the standard, and he has he created a chart about this. And I can tell you, when we were in person, he went through the chart quite a bit. We spent quite a bit of time on it, And I'm going to see if I can show it to you right here. Sorry, guys. It's right here. See this chart? Let's see if I can do the chart. Here's a chart. Kind of cool, right? Not doing a good job. So here's the 4 Ps. The first is the problem. You need to identify a problem to solve. Second is planning. Well, once you know what the problem is, let's say your problem, you're overweight. So the problem is, I need to lose 20 pounds. Now, remember, in the elements, that you have to be detailed. I want to lose 20 pounds that will, lower my A1C, lower my triglycerides, lower my blood sugar, give me more energy, make me more effective at 4 o'clock. Whatever, list the details of what the problem is and what you want to solve. Not just, I want to lose 20 pounds. Why? What's all the things related? What's the downstream things? And then you have to create, then the second one is planning, which is create a thought out plan of attack that you can implement, right? So how are you going to lose 20 pounds? What are you going to do? What are going to be your daily disciplines? What are going to be the activities? What do you need to learn? Type of thing. How do you need to eat differently? How do you need to exercise? How do you have to show up? That's planning. The third P is performance. And in the performance, the thing that Ben goes into in the book is don't get bogged down with perfection, right? Create the best plan you can, but get into action soon, right? Because imperfect action is better than no action at all. So performance, and then the last one is payoff. And payoff is a really important, and I really like Ben's thoughts on this. When you talk about payoff is less of a celebration and more of a confirmation. It's a confirmation that the framework you chose, the framework you adopted, is the right framework, right? And so it's a confirmation, not a celebration. And it's not something you arrive at. It's something that you're traveling through, right? And in our conference, Ben taught about in the day that he led at our mastermind day. Ben talked about this quite a bit, and he did a really good job, because see, the payoff is the confirmation that the process is working. And that's not when you should stop the process, right? And then he talks about the seduction of success, which he also talks about in the book, right? And the seduction of success comes between the problem and the payoff. It comes in the planning and performance stage, right? But don't stop. Don't stop because your process is working. That's the whole thing. You didn't attain a goal. You implemented a process, a framework. And so you have to fight against that. Interesting. So those are the 4 Ps. So the book, the first 110 pages is kind of the outline of the standard, and then the next 20 pages are kind of tools that you can use. Whether it's he goes in, which I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's a little section for the 4 Ps and how to implement them and how they work. Now, another concept in the book. Just before I'm going to get to attack the process, which is another really big concept, but a couple things to think about. It keeps saying this. The standard is not about emotions. It's about a framework. A matter of fact, take the emotions out of it, right? Now, look how nuanced this is, though. Because one of the things, the concepts that Ben is, I don't want to say famous for, but a core tenet of his teaching and coaching. And by the way, I did a bad job of explaining Ben. He's a performance and mental toughness coach. He coaches some of the most successful sports teams in the world, including he was a toughness and performance coach for Alabama for 5 years. He coaches NBA teams, NFL teams. He coaches top corporations. He coaches top salespeople. He's highly sought after. He's done it for over 20 years. And so in his books, he uses plenty of his clients' examples. So he talks about Alabama, or he talks about MSU, or he talks about his athletes or the companies like Microsoft. They're really good stories in the book, make it enjoyable to read. But in all those things, he has what's the burn. And the day I spent with him, our group spent with him, he talked about the burn for half the time. And in his books, he talks about the burn. Interestingly, he doesn't talk about the burn in huge depth in the standard. He does in his podcast. Matter of fact, he has a weekly podcast called The Burn. And so if you want to plug into Ben, subscribe to his podcast, The Burn. But The Burn is, it's interesting because when I first heard him talking about it, I heard him talking about it on a podcast. It really sounded like the burn is equal to what people call their why, right? But it's not really that. And then I thought, well, maybe the burn is a combination of your why and your purpose, right? That's what the burn is, and that's not quite right yet that either. What the burn is, as Ben explains it, it's the fire that ignites or feeds your why and your purpose. It's the energy that surrounds it, right? That moves it, that brings it alive. And he talks about all the time, you need to really understand your burn and you need to plug into it intentionally every day. And you need to let that burn be that energy that surrounds your why and your purpose and drives it and gives it life every day. And so that's a really, I think, a good concept. Is it kind of puts some more layers to the why kind of thing. So from then he moves on to, he has a chapter which is probably one of my favorite chapters, and attack the process. And in attack the process, what he's speaking to is is attack versus trust. We hear trust the process, right? And he's like, no, attack the process. Trust the process is giving too much control to something outside of you. Like somebody created a process, I'm gonna blindly track the process, and but he's like, no, attack it every day, right? And he goes, your standard, your process, your framework needs to have an aggressive element to it, right? It's just not like ho-de-doo-doo-doo-doo. It's like, no, edgy, attack it, right? And then, part of attacking the process is, really maintaining consistency in your activities, focus on your activities, not your results. I keep saying this throughout the book. And then that's the key. So that's the attack the process. Attack versus, trust the process. Attack is you put your fingerprints on it. You own it. It's your process. It's not, follow the process or trust the process. It's attack your process. And in part of that, in that chapter, he comes up with a prize fighter day. And that is how to win the day. It's his way of describing how do you win the day. And you win the day, with a prize fighter mentality. Now, I don't know, he calls it the prize fighter day, but I don't know what the link is to a prize fighter, because it doesn't have anything to do with boxing, but I guess it's the title. And so the prize fighter day, there's 3 components to the prize fighter day. There are 3 of them it's personal, professional, and service to others, right? And personal is master a discipline for your personal life and work on that discipline every day. Professional is the same thing, but master whatever the most important activity you can do professionally, master that, do it every day, and do more of it every day. And then service to others, help someone else. And so what he says is you need to have a prize fighter day. You need to have victories driving whatever it is that the discipline you need for personal success, for professional success, and then service to others, and get that done as early in the day as possible. And that's another big part of the book, and it's a big part when you listen to his podcast. All these guys, whether it's Ed Milet or it's Ben Newman, or even when you hear heck, Dave Savage, all these guys, Renee, win the day. Of course, win the day early, right? And so get victories in these 3 buckets early in the day. That way, you're going to win the day, right? If you start right, you're going to win the day. Now, this next section, which I really like, we're way long. I got to speed this up, so sorry. This next section that I really like is the requirements of the unrequired. This, I highlight the whole chapter. And it also was the thing I got the most out of his podcast and in person, right? And the thing here is, he says, is to attain any type of success in life, you have to succeed at the required standards. You got to do the requirement, right? And that's what you need to daily win. But if you want to achieve more, then you need to do the unrequired, right? I really love the whole concept of unrequired. And here's the thing, listen to this. And I remember he said this, and it was a great. I mean, see how this strikes you. The unrequired standard means doing the things that other people can't see, won't do, or talk about, right? And not only do you do those things, you make those your priority, right? I mean, you do things that people can't even talk about, right? They can't even conceptualize. They don't want to say it out loud, and you do those things as your priority, right? And that totally separates you from the rest, right? And as you focus on doing the unrequired, you have to. What happens is you start to have a success, and so you also must master silencing that seduction of success that we talked about before, right? And we're going to talk about that. I'm way late, so I'm going to speed up, but I really want to talk about that because doing the unrequired is a phenomenal thought. Just Google that and you'll really enjoy it. He has the duality of aggressive patience. That is, you need to be aggressive and patient at the same time. He talks about it in a chapter, explains why they can coexist. In it, he refers, he references the Stonecutter's credo from Pound the Stone. You know how the stonecutter has to pound the stone 100 times and nothing happens, and the 101st time, it finally cracks. But you need to be both patient and aggressive. He talks about leadership. I'm not going to talk about that. He wrote a whole book on leadership and his UITS. The expectations of unexpected intentional. You can check it out. He does has a lengthy chapter, which is another chapter I highlight a lot of stuff called the physical standard. And I'm just going to say a couple of these things because hopefully they strike you. And he says, look, you can be as mentally tough as a honey badger, but if your body is soft and squishy as bread dough, you'll never get anything you want in life. And the physical standards are the easiest way for others to see you and your standards and to measure your progress. Isn't that interesting? Like if you say you're becoming something different, the easy way for people to measure it is by your health, right? How do you look, And then when you create a physical standard, you're recalibrating everything, right? And when you look at a physical standard, it's about the unrequired part of the workout. And that unrequired part of the workout, this unrequired concept, comes up all over the place. Then it's interesting. He did mention from David Goggins' book, and he's friends with David Goggins. I think they speak a lot together. The 40% rule for Navy SEALs. Like when you're completely exhausted, fatigued, and think you've given everything, well, you're just about 40% of the way there. Interesting concept. I'll share another time about I was sitting next to an athlete and he told me my 10%, my 100% was his 10%, and I totally believed him. I'll tell you that story another time. Your physical standard is yours alone. And I mean, here, when you go to the physical standard, here's three things. It says, break a sweat, be mindful of what you feed your body, get a trainer. Like that's the easy way to start, right? Those three things. And then as he starts to wrap up the book, which I need to wrap up because it's super long, strength over adversity, and he goes, look, pain is a necessary teacher. Through pain and adversity, we become stronger, and if we master the standard of how to triumph pain and adversity, right, then we've mastered our emotions and have, adopted a framework called the standard that will carry us to do great things, right? Because emotions hold us back. And he talks about the way the Wounded Warrior, in that you can just, he talks about, how people have, sacrifice a lot and still show up. Then he gets into, as we start to wrap up, the own it mentality. He goes, make the standard your way of life. Everything else is less. Do what you say you will do. Connect to the burn. And then he spends time on focus your focus. And that is create intentional focus. This is super important in the book. You can read it. It makes sense. You really got to control what you focus on as part of your framework. In the back of the book, as I mentioned, he has 4 sections to help you tools. Let's say tools to attack the standard, the burn, your prize fighter day, standard over feelings, and the 4 P's of the standard. If you're interested in his stuff, listen to the Burn podcast. He's written, I didn't know this, he's written 6 books. I know I need to read Uncommon Leadership. That's one of his best-selling books. He also has your Mental Toughness Playbook, Leave Your Legacy, The Power of Unleashing Your Greatness. He wrote Own Your Success, The Power of Choosing Greatness and Making Every Day Victorious. Another book is Fight the Good Fight, Another Legacy Lives On. And then finally, Pocket Truths for Success, 365 Days Principle, Become the Most Successful Person You Know. So, just I'll share a couple last notes. Let me just give me a second. I love, this is from our live session with them. I have about 10 pages of notes. We don't have much time. I'm not going to go through it. I will tell you when you talked about your your physical standard, he was super strong about this, and see how it feels to you guys. He hammered this. He goes, you can only lead people to the level of discipline you live. And he talked about a parent. Like, as a parent, you're limited to how good a parent you could be, to how disciplined or what your standard is. Same thing as a leader, as an owner, whatever it is. Your standard is your limit, or your disciplines are your limits, right? If you're undisciplined, then you're extremely unlimited. I really enjoyed that. He also talked about it when we were live. Don't trip on anything behind you. I love that idea. Don't trip on anything behind you. Confidence is built on discipline, not talent. Don't allow your feelings to affect how you show up. I could go on. You get the idea. Check out the book. It's a short book, easy to read. You can just dabble in it by just listening to one of me in podcasts. He's on everybody. Check out Ed Milet. If you subscribe to Dave Savage, check out Mortgage Coach. Check out The Burn. Heck, Google the guy. I enjoyed the book. I'll be using this concept not this week, but next week in my new normal series on Thursdays, which is going great. I'm sorry I went super long. I'll try to be more concise in the future. I hope everybody has a great Sunday. It's a crazy world out there. Stay safe.